Hello, this is Susan Bird, and you are listening to the Curated Conversations podcasts. In this series, East meets West and vice versa, we're exploring conversations taking place between Asia and the West on a variety of subjects. With me today is Kevin Socha, Managing Director of Karl Mayr, the innovative market leader and driving force in building the machinery used in textile manufacturing. In other words, his company makes the machines that in turn make textiles. Kevin worked in various roles in Western Europe, where he was born, until 1994 when he moved to Hong Kong, and from there has expanded his relationships and experience throughout the Asia-Pacific region. Having lived and worked in both the West and Asia, Kevin's perspective should be especially interesting on our topic. Welcome to Curated Conversations, Kevin.
Thank you.
So when we talk about the conversations taking place between Asia and the West, what does that mean to you? What do you think of when we say that?
Well, it's a different way of looking at things, because I'm not too sure that the East and West really talk about each other too much like that. Yeah. What I notice is that people who are living in the West, they tend to have a very inaccurate picture of how things are in Asia and what people think about in Asia, and it's the same the other way around. Asian people don't really understand how Western people are or what they think either. We're also quite alien to them, in many cases.
So in fact, it's not so much that we're conversing, but that we're conjecturing and not very accurately.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
what is the inaccurate picture that Westerners have of Asia and vice versa? How would you describe that?
Well, that's a topic all by itself. People from the West tend to lump everybody in Asia into one sort of block, which focuses mostly on the Chinese, and Asian people are also quite different amongst themselves,
That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, China, Asian people are slightly different to Westerners because they focus so much on the future and on their next generations. They're much more, they place much more emphasis on trying to get things better for the next generation, which is not quite so common in Western people. Western people tend to be more focused on enjoying the now, what they have now, and having more fun right now, whereas Asians tend to look more forward and try to lay down a better foundation for their next generation and give them a better chance.
And how about the other way around? What do Asians think about the West that may or may not be accurate?
I think they assume that Westerners don't really think very much of them. That Westerners consider them to be, irrelevant, and particularly the Chinese. They've got quite a hang up about how the West regards them. They feel that they've got to try and make themselves bigger and better to get over what they think were their weaknesses in the past, and where they were always knocked down by the West and beaten by the West, and they have this idea that the West is trying to keep doing it. They believe that Westerners look down on them, which is not entirely the case with the people that I work with. We regard the Asians as being in many cases to be quite well organized, and to be quite well organized to develop themselves and their countries going forward. In some cases better than in the West. There is, to some extent, in some areas, there's a little bit of envy in the West of how things are developing so well in Asia.
So that leads to my next question, which is, how have these perceptions shifted, if they have, during the time that you've been there? We went there in 1994, so it sounds like there's been some shift in those perceptions.
Well, there certainly has, because if you go back to when I came out here, China was still, it was really very much a third world country and extremely backward. And so that's how people dealt with them, as a third world country, and basically someone who you should take advantage of. And of course, over the last 30 years or so, they've really developed in a tremendous way, and they've started to expand outwards and starting to get footprints in countries like the US and all over Europe, by investing and cities and the society in China has developed quite a lot. It's not the sort of not as repressive as it used to be. So they've made quite big steps forward. And as I say, gone from a place where people could really look down on them, as it was a third world country, and now it's pretty much one of the leading countries in the world.
Now, has their perception or their view of Westerners changed as well?
Yeah, I think they don't look up to them as much. They don't consider them to be quite so far ahead of them, and quite so, they believe now that they can see now that they can defeat the West if they want to, economically.
So let's talk about your business of manufacturing textile machinery. As I remember, you had embarked, when we last talked, you'd embarked on a somewhat disruptive policy in the industry, namely dealing in secondhand machinery as well as brand new manufacture of machines. How has that gone?
Well, okay, the used machine part is that one's just starting, and what we're trying to do is make it a more transparent business, because the used equipment business in any field, whether it's construction machinery or textile machinery, it tends to be a little bit shady, So the information's always a little bit hidden. Deals are done behind closed doors and so on. Prices are never fully opened to the public, and so what we're trying to do is to create a platform for people to look at the used machinery in our field and see exactly what it's being sold for, and have an idea what the machines are actually worth, and not be fooled, because there's an awful lot of very bad deals done, and dirty tricks and so on been done in the past in that business. So we're trying to improve it as well as disrupt it.
So is there any difference between, because you operate in a number of countries, is there any difference between the company, is there any difference between the countries when you talk about how it's been done in the past? Has that been more true in some places than others?
You mean from the point of view of sort of questionable deals and cheating people? Is that what you mean? Yeah, yes. There were certain countries were much worse than others. I mean, one of the most risky places to buy used equipment from, a place like Turkey. But it's not only them. I mean, it's because generally it's quite a dirty business anyway. It's not unlike buying used cars, So I think you have to watch out for what you're buying,
How has the Internet of Things influenced your approach to your manufacturing efforts?
Well, it's at the moment it's having an ever growing effect on our business. If you have if a customer is using machinery in a country like Malaysia, technicians there, if his breaks down, we have to send a technician from somewhere else in the world. So he faces, first of all, quite a hefty bill for flying the guy in. Then he faces the weight. The guy has to come along and so on. And what we're trying to do is develop systems where you can, the machine itself can tell us what's wrong with it to a certain extent. And beyond that, we're looking into the possibilities now to use things like Google Glasses, that kind of technology. Where we can guide people by looking at what they're doing through the Google Glasses and guiding them as to what they should do. Yeah. just to basically give them advice and tell them how to repair the equipment themselves by seeing what they see and telling them what to do to the machine, rather than having to send
So
a
that
physical
seems consistent with the effort
technician in
that
to
you
do the
had
job.
talked about once before about now starting to produce in markets where you've been really active and localizing the production rather than shipping stuff to them. You had a long history of successful business in India, to which you were shipping machines from elsewhere. I believe it was China, Germany, and Italy. Are you now manufacturing there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We're manufacturing small amounts of specialized equipment for the market. Yes. Yeah. That's but it has, as you said, it's always been our policy to produce in our bigger markets. So anywhere we have a reasonable size, stable business manufacture there. They're also driven by the sort of tax and tariff barriers for delivering into those countries. Because it's much more, you get much more advantage if you can produce inside the market. Then you don't have you don't face all the
Now, you had talked about the
tariffs which are placed on
challenges to
imported
your
equipment.
approach. One of the challenges being 3D printing, that other people can make parts of things that before would be inherent in your machinery. And one of the resistance when you were doing 3D printing yourself were the old line engineers and their lack of enthusiasm for doing this differently. Is that still true?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, it's we're getting over it. I would say we're getting over it. We do now have teams who are actually actively doing R&D in that field, trying to see how far we can go, to do things. But actually, the biggest challenge with going into 3D printing and engineering is having engineers who understand and who are motivated to design
You mean
parts
to find the
which
engineers?
benefit from the 3D printing.
Ah.
Yes. Yes, it's to find people who are able to do it. In our industry, we deal with design in lots of different areas because we make textile machines. We also work quite a lot with design in that field. And so some of our machines also don't get used very well by customers because they haven't got designers able to use all the functions in the machines because they can't understand it and they can't relate to the machine and come up with ideas to make use the abilities of the machine. It's the same for us with 3D printing. Because a 3D printer, if you just use a 3D printer, make the same part which you make today using a CNC tool center, there's no point, because you won't get the benefit out of it. What we're looking to do is to use 3D printers to make components which can achieve the function that we already have with the machine part, or maybe do something slightly different, but do it metal inside, be less heavy, have a different shape, be stronger. You can with 3D printing, you can do things which you can't do with
The
machine tools.
difficulty in finding engineers and people who can actually use them appropriately, is that as true in China and India and Germany or Italy? Is there any difference between countries to that aspect?
Oh yeah. Creative design is still quite poor in Asia. The bright spots in Asia are in Japan and Korea, where they're really quite creative in terms of engineering, design, and thinking.
It's fascinating. Yeah. Now, you had also embarked on a pay-for-use system. How's that progressing?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're still how to do that one because for us it's one of those strategies which we're considering at the moment because things are changing all the time in our business, and some companies they don't want to commit the capital to invest in in new machinery.
I can understand that. Now, when you look at your experience in both the West and Asia, do you see a difference in the enthusiasm of the people for digital disruption in general? I think you said you had told me about a trip you took to Italy and said you had a hard time finding a SIM card. Um, that you found people there maybe only half-heartedly embracing the internet, which came as a surprise to me. Is do you have you? That was a couple of years ago. Is there any difference in your view now as to where the most enthusiastic response is to digital disruption?
Yeah, well, from my point of view, the way the internet's been embraced here in Asia is it's really quite tremendous. You know, people are using it in every part of their lives. You know, what you're seeing over here is that, you know, people are doing all their shopping online. They're living their lives online using not just the internet, but in China, for example, things like WeChat uh, and similar chat systems. It's like their local version of WhatsApp, you know. If you in countries like India, the internet has overtaken their telephone system. You know, so people are using the internet more to communicate there than the sort of traditional telephone networks. And the most strongly internet active country out anywhere in the world now is actually Korea, where you know some massive percentage of the population which actually has internet connection. And when you go to Europe and over to sort of Canada and the States, you know, the internet's present, but people don't seem to use it quite as much as the Asians do. You know.
Well, that's fascinating. And you said that Japan as well, right? That the Japanese and the Koreans are. When we talked about China last, you mentioned Alibaba and Tencent, which are obviously great examples of companies who have been highly disruptive themselves and have expanded broadly in a number of areas. But that the other companies there were not so disruptive. Is that shifted since we last talked? That was a while ago.
But you mean disruptive within their own country?
I mean, our other company, there were such great examples, Alibaba and Tencent, but that others, especially the SOEs, were still pretty traditionally run. Has that shifted at all?
Well, actually, there aren't so the situation with state-owned enterprises is you know they're really sort of going into the sunset. You know, you don't see so many state-owned enterprises anymore in China. They've mostly become transformed into more or less private companies, particularly in the businesses that we're active in. We only come across SOEs in the sort of in the western part of China, you know, in the less developed areas. But there are, if you talk about other companies coming up out of the internet, you know, there are ones like I always get the names wrong. I think it's Weibao or Taibao. That's another one which is coming up alongside Tencent and Alibaba. The Chinese will always try to take over somebody else's idea. You know, the Chinese companies they always face the risk that people will come in and try to copy what they're doing and to grab a piece of their pie. You know, so just because Jack Ma got a head start doesn't mean he's able to sit back and assume that he'll be able to stay there. You know, I think I don't think that Alibaba's really got everything to themselves in the market anymore. You know.
So, would you say that innovation has really taken hold now in China? Do you think that this assumption has been that the real innovation was taking place in the West and the Chinese and others were copying? That looks like that view is now somewhat dated. Is your thought that they are becoming innovative themselves and not just copying?
No, they're still very much into. They're not very innovative. They still don't have that. They're trying, but most of their efforts still involve sending people overseas and hoping that by giving them a foreign education, that they'll come back and be more creative than they've been in their, with the Chinese education system. But they're still very, very heavy on copying. They copy each other. They copy foreign equipment, but they're not creative in any great sense.
So that difference remains. What about the increased pressure regarding privacy issues? Does that impact your approach to digitalization? And I'd be especially interested in whether there are big differences in the privacy laws, if they even exist, between, say, Western countries and Asia.
Well, we're actually a German company, so we face one of the strictest sort of privacy regimes for the internet over here. They're extremely strict about what you're allowed to do on the internet and what information you're allowed to collect. That's not the case in Asia. There still aren't too many safeguards in place to protect your privacy online. That hasn't matured yet in Asia. You might say it's down to the culture itself. I think they don't see really any need for it, but or at least they don't see it yet. Whereas people in the West seem to be more suspicious about the internet.
Yes, I would agree.
Certainly in the European side, the people that I deal with mostly, they're like German society. A lot of people here are very suspicious about the internet. To the point that people will get Google to take their house off Google Street View because they're afraid that people will see when they're not home.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Kevin,
I didn't make that one up,
Kevin, are there other issues that you that come to mind regarding the interesting differences you've seen in your business between your work in Asia and your life and experience in the West? Anything else that comes to mind?
Well, I think one of the most impressive things out here is the way people are prepared to take a chance. Yeah, they're prepared to take a risk, in order to get ahead. Most people in the West are very conservative. They're quite risk averse. Yeah, and what you find with a lot of Asian people, they're willing to take a chance. So this is why you get people like Jack Ma coming along and creating a company like Alibaba in a society like China. And even in our business, we find people who will step into our business even though they have no experience of it, and they'll make a go of it and they'll make a success of it. They don't always fall on their face, but they're willing to take the risk, and we just don't see that back in Europe,
To what do you attribute that?
Well, I guess to some extent, in the old days in China, people were desperate to better their lives, and take any chance to make things better for themselves. And I think that they're not from their own society. They're also not risk averse. They're a little bit. They like to gamble. They like to take a chance, and they're willing to take a chance rather than avoiding it. So they'll take that shot. They'll liquidate all their assets or borrow money from somewhere, and they'll set up a factory and make a go of it.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been a delight to share your perspectives. Kevin Socha is Managing Director of Carl Mayer, the innovative market leader and driving force in building the machinery used in textile machinery manufacture. Kevin worked in various roles in Western Europe until 1994 when he moved to Hong Kong, and from there expanded his relationships and experience throughout the Asia-Pacific region. Kevin joined us today from Germany on the East Meets West and Vice Versa series on Curated Conversations. This is Susan Bird.